Hello everyone and welcome to Z's Tesla, where we review my Model 3 performance doing full self-driving. And I have with me here B.
Hey everyone.
So far the drive has been fine. Right now, full self-driving beta just kicked in because it was able to localize, and then I turned it on with 2 taps of the gear stalk. But we have something interesting happening here. We see, before we get into the intersection, that there is something in the far back, and that looks like a fire truck. There's a car coming from this and 3 cones blocking it. The cones look like they're blocking part of the left side of that road. So what would you do in this situation?
I mean, I would have just taken it right.
I would too. And that's why this is kind of concerning, that the vehicle was going to go straight through that.
That's really weird.
I know. So it
because the cones are really obvious, you can see it.
Yeah, and it can see it. You can see the cones inside of the.
I mean, if it's supposed to be really adaptive, it should be able to.
Yeah, but what I think, because it's a car coming, it just decided to try to go through.
So I guess because it saw.
Yeah, but just because
somebody... like, oh, let me just replicate it, but that car is coming from the opposite side though.
Yeah.
So why would it? Interesting.
So it made that decision, and I personally wouldn't have felt super comfortable with it. So I turned it off. You can see it's off now. But yeah, so that's the sort of stuff that it's been doing, and I think you've seen it in person, but our viewers haven't seen it. So after that, I just turned it back on because it's like, okay, it's freaked out a little bit, but we've figured it out.
Do you need to turn it off when you're trying to like take over or override these types of decisions that the car is about to make?
It turns itself off.
It turns itself off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it doesn't. As in, I hit the brake and that kills it. It's like cruise control where it'll turn.
Oh, I see.
A cool thing here is that you see the people walking and you see the cars that are on the left and right showing up on the screen. So you can kind of see what the car is seeing, which makes it a little bit more reasonable when it makes interesting decisions, like it's about to in the second stop sign. So here, this is one of the minor inconvenience issues with FSD Beta, which is that like when it gets to a stop sign and doesn't have good visibility, it'll inch forward like people do, right? But the thing is, like, it takes forever. You're seeing it right now where realistically you should have had a harder stop and then inch forward once and then accelerate a lot more.
I see.
Right? As a driver, you would do that. But the FSD Beta took a lot longer to make that same decision and was a lot slower in it.
This could confuse other drivers on the road too.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing or important thing to keep note of, because I'm in the autonomy space. I work on autonomous vehicles that kind of aren't supposed to be around people, but our definition of success is that the vehicle should be as boring as possible. So the less interesting it is, the more like expected its behavior is, the better it's driving. FSD Beta isn't there yet, like you saw, where like it makes decisions that can confuse other people, and therefore it's not boring and not really successful. So, what do you think about it so far?
I mean, it's okay.
What do you feel?
I think it's more for people who are experienced drivers than new drivers, just because if you're just starting to get the ropes of things, you know, maybe you might get a little nervous on the road, or maybe it's taking something and you just kind of like, I don't know, forget what you're doing in that moment.
Yeah, so like you kind of have to stay vigilant.
You have to stay very vigilant.
Yeah, I agree. And then make some interesting decisions. So right here, we have about like 0.6 to half a mile left into a freeway on-ramp. Generally on this road, because there's usually a lot more cars, I would like to be in the far right lane as early as possible, because just waiting for it means I have to make slightly more risky maneuvers. And that's kind of something I was pointing out in the video too. I just muted it because I like reviewing it this way. But you see the car did suggest it. It did go all the way to the right. It turned by itself, but it was a lot later than I would have liked personally, just because especially after this light, there tends to be a lot more cars and a lot more people. So doing it earlier and safer, in my opinion, is better, coming from like the perspective of like a safer driver.
I see. I think also your experience might be based on the fact that like your familiarity with this road, and maybe the data that they use is based on just kind of like a general average of what people should do in this situation.
That's true, but there are a lot of roads like this. Like this is my expectation from, like this is for people who live in the Bay. This is the El Camino Real, so it's like it's a relatively big road in technically a city street. But it's kind of like when with roads like these with higher speed limits, you can see there's a speed limit of 40. You kind of should be a little bit more careful. A little bit closer to freeway driving than driving. So here's another important thing. Another time when I had to disable FSD Beta. I'll rewind it slightly, and you see here the bus is stopping. And like most people, when a bus kind of stops, we would look to go around it. FSD Beta will also look to go around it, which is fine. So you see the cars move, and you see the car has now decided that it wants to go around this bus because it's stopped and it doesn't know why. And like it's pretty reasonable for it to start driving here. What is kind of annoying or kind of scary to me was that it started doing it right when the car behind me started doing it, but it was doing it slow.
So it wasn't really adjusting for the speed of the other cars around it.
Yeah, so it adjusted for the cars in front, it was fine. But this car that decided to move at the same time, or slightly before me, but you can't really tell, and you can see the car here, it started moving slightly before me, and so my car should have either decided to stop and let that car through, or accelerated faster. But it was going slow, and it just made me really uncomfortable. I think technically it would have been okay. But it
would have been okay
because the other car behind me would have probably slowed down or stopped, but I just didn't feel comfortable with it, so I went ahead and turned it off. And it's like things like these that make me kind of hesitant with where it is, because this is set to be safer. This is like the safest I could make FSD Beta, and it just didn't make me feel that safe in that moment.
Do you think that this is something that could be fixed?
Yeah.
Over time?
Yeah, they have to improve the behaviors that they're programming into the cars. And some of it is defined by AI and neural nets, and some of it will be defined by behavior trees, and some of it will be a mix of everything. But whichever way they decide to do it, it needs to be tuned a little bit better for things like this. For at least my comfort level. So another thing that I didn't realize when I initially got FSD Beta is that once you're on the freeways, it switches to enhanced autopilot. And another thing I want to note here, the car told me to, enhanced autopilot told me to go to the left lane, and now it's immediately telling me to go back to the right lane. And that's because eventually it'll have to go all the way to the right.
Do you know the reasoning as to why it's enhanced autopilot on the freeway and not full self-driving?
Because full self-driving is not ready for freeway, basically. The enhanced autopilot works. It'll navigate on autopilot, which will take you from the entrance of the on-ramp to the exit, and it will suggest lane changes. It won't change them by itself, unlike full self-driving Beta, but it will suggest them. And here it's been suggesting this for a while, but I refuse to do it because you saw those cars are merging out right into the 101. So this is the 92, and there's an on-ramp from the 101 coming here and from the 101 coming there. These are freeway speed on-ramps, generally 45 to 60 miles per hour. This is a crazy intersection that gets really crowded. If I'm in the lane it's telling to, which I will let it do later, it's kind of a little bit more uncomfortable again because of the fact that there's a bajillion merges happening. So you can see all those cars merging from on the right side into this lane that I'm in. So again, the car is making this decision, but as a driver, I've clearly seen what's going on. And this is reasonable because the car probably can't recognize what the on-ramp looks like.
I also think there's a little bit of a delay in the recognition of the car, like other cars around it and what's going on. I've noticed that too when we're just driving on the streets as well.
Yeah.
It's a very minor delay, but definitely is there.
Well, some of it is just a delay in what it shows because a lot of times it will see
So you're saying in what it shows there's a delay, but like in the actual reaction, it's pretty much...
It should be faster.
Okay.
At least that's what Tesla says. Tesla also says that it sees a lot more than what you're seeing on the screen, which is probably reasonable because this is like the higher likelihoods of what it sees being shown. It's all like possibilities or potential. Probabilities that it's showing. So I think when it's probable enough, it will show something at a specific location. But here, so this is a freeway that went from 5 lanes to 3. The right side 4 lanes turned into 2, and it wanted to go into those lanes that are merging, when I personally just wait a little bit longer and then I merge it. And that just makes me feel safer because I'm not in those lanes where there's a lot more happening. Instead, I've waited for people to figure themselves out, and then I can move at a slightly later date. And And here, like, you saw that happened a mile out from the exit. So again, it's inconsistent because on the freeway streets, it was like half a mile or less before it started going to the lane. On the freeway, it's a lot earlier when it shouldn't be in this case. But coming back to enhanced autopilot and full self-driving beta, do you know how much it costs to get it full price?
No, how much does it cost?
So full price for enhanced autopilot is like $5,000 right now, or $6,000, and FSD
Really?
Beta is like $16,000 or $15,000.
That's insane.
So it's like a $10,000 difference. And if you're driving primarily freeway, you're never gonna use.
Maybe it's not
FSD
much
Beta.
of a use then.
Yeah, but the subscription is only FSD Beta, and that's $200. And like the funny thing is, you're paying $200 a month to beta test something when usually beta tests are a little bit more qualified. And now they've removed all the qualifications for being a beta tester.
Yeah, I remember when you first tried to get FSD, you had to do a safety score or something.
Yeah, and they got that.
Halfway through.
So before we talk more about that, like a little bit of an interesting thing. This is an intersection I wanted to show our audience, because you see that there's 3 red lights there and then 3 red lights here. These red lights on the right are pretty clearly for turning, right?
Right.
So why does the car decide that they're not for turning and just decides to go through? It thinks it's some sort of protected right turn when it's not. There was a red light, it should have stopped,
Interesting.
paid attention, and then went. I usually stop it there because there's cars coming, but this time there was no cars on the left, so I just wanted to show you guys kind of an example of like edge cases that the car hasn't been ready for at all. So yeah, that.
You think I wasn't ready for that because that's something that's not usual, or
Yeah,
is
I think it's
just...
like an unusual thing. But like for us as drivers, there's enough context there that we would have figured it out.
Right.
But
I mean,
the
it should have
car-
figured it out though.
it should if it's as good as a
Because-
real driver. But FSD Beta is not. It's a beta, and it's something that makes your life easier, but it's not quite at the level of like a human driver. When I was driving with somebody earlier, they called it like a child who has too much confidence. And in future videos, especially videos in San Francisco, you'll see a lot of that. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Thanks.
And we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.